It's been 15 years since the original Scream film came out. It came out in 1996 and single-handedly reinvented and reinvigorated the slasher film subgenre of horror. Now, it's a film that I grew up watching. I saw that when I was younger, and the sequel, Scream 2 and 3, and now I've just seen Scream 4. And it's basically got returning cast members, Neve Campbell, Courtney and David Arquette. It's directed once again by Wes Craven and written by the writer of Scream 1 and 2, Kevin Williamson. And I have to say that, well, to be honest, up until a few months ago, I didn't know that they were doing a Scream 4. I had no idea. And when I heard about it, I was really excited because the Scream films are one of my favourite horror franchises. Now, they are very differing in quality, but I have to say overall it's one of my favourite franchises. Now, I was a little bit apprehensive because Wes Craven's latest work hasn't been up to the standard that we know him for. You know, this is the guy who did the original A Nightmare on Elm Street, the Last House on the Left, and obviously the first Scream movies. He's a master, he's a genius. There is no denying that Wes Craven is one of the greatest horror directors who's ever lived. Suffice it to say, Scream has a special place in my heart, and the idea of fourth film, 11 years after the last sequel, Scream 3, was an exciting prospect, I have to say. So, basically, the plot follows Neve Campbell's character, Sidney Prescott, returning to her hometown of Woodsboro for the last stop on her book tour. She's kind of an aspiring author, and for the last stop on the book tour, she returns to her hometown where obviously the original films took place. And it's upon her return that some new murders start taking place and the old characters get roped into it. So the actual setup of the film I quite like. I like the idea of her returning to her hometown. It's got a very kind of classic horror movie feel to it, you know, the main character, the one that got away coming home. I like that aspect of it. And I like all the actors who return, and as I said, there's Courtney and David Arquette as well, playing Gale Weathers and Sheriff Dewey. They're constantly good in all the films, and particularly here as well. Now, this is where some of my problems with the movie come in. I feel like the script, as I said, it's written by Kevin Williamson, who did the original 2, and he walked away from number 3, which was written by Erin Kruger. He's returned to script duties on this, and I was disappointed that there is no real character development in this movie at all. Now, it basically hints at a lot between the characters. It hints at what Sidney's had to do to try and move on from the events of the previous 3 films, but it never explains it. It hints that Dewey and Gale's marriage is kind of on the rocks because she's struggling to write her latest book because there's no murders being taking place. She's got a complete lack of inspiration, and their marriage is suffering as a result. That literally it's addressed in one scene where you know, where they're in bed together, and that's it. It's never really mentioned again. The way they speak to each other throughout the films, throughout the film, is the way that a couple would speak to each other if they were kind of, you know, coming to the end of a relationship. But it never develops that aspect of the script further than just a glance, if you will. So I honestly felt there was a complete lack of character development in this movie. It's been over a decade since the last movie. You know, what have these characters been up to? What have they been through? How has that changed them? You know, they've lived a decade since the last film, and there's just no mention of what's been going on in that decade. And that was one of the main disappointments with the movie, is that I love these characters. Like I say, I love the Scream movies. I've grown up watching these characters, and I want to know what they've been up to, but I'm none the wiser. And that kind of underdevelopment applies to some of the other features of the script as well. Now, what I did enjoy is the fact that this film, obviously the Scream films, if you've seen them, have always been about the rules of horror movies, the cliches, and trying to subvert those cliches and turn them on the head. Now, they basically focus on the remake aspect of Hollywood in this film, and the kind of general gist is that this killer is trying to remake the events of the first Scream movie, but, you know, up the gore, up the ante, and all the rest of it. And throughout the film, you have characters cynically referring to all the recent horror remakes and torture porn of the last 10 years. but it never goes far enough with it. It never develops that idea. It has kind of a little jab, you know, it pokes fun at remakes, but it doesn't develop its ideas. It doesn't make enough of a comment on the state of Hollywood horror today. You know, I would have preferred it if, I mean, in the same way that Scream 2 basically had the whole thing of a sequel having to live up to the original, and they did that brilliantly well. They developed that idea fully in Scream 2, had scenes devoted to it, the characters, you know, knew about it all the way through the film, and I thought it was really well done. Even Scream 3 had its moments where, you know, it's a trilogy, it's the end of a trilogy, all bets are off, if you will, and that was kind of a theme of that movie. This one, you know, the idea of having remakes and commenting on remakes is such fertile ground for a script. I can't believe that they didn't deliver on it. It was so disappointing that they didn't carry that further. And I know I'm kind of dwelling on that point, but after they developed the idea of a sequel in Scream 2 and a threequel in Scream 3, how can they not deliver on it here? You know, they've had 10 years to make this movie and develop the script, and it falls short. That's not to say I didn't enjoy the movie. The movie is a lot of fun. I thought the opening scene before the credits was really quite clever, quite meta, but also obviously addressing and poking fun at what the critics said about Scream 3, because you know, Scream 3 is the weakest of the bunch. It became too meta, and they try to incorporate that into the beginning of Scream 4, and I really enjoyed that. What the characters say about the Stab movies is obviously what the critics said about the Scream movies, and I thought that was a really quite clever beginning, and with a very nice cameo from Anna Paquin and a couple of other quite famous actresses. Beginning was fine. Another thing, and this kind of leads into the character development thing I was saying earlier, but the film doesn't let up for a minute. It's literally chase scene after chase scene after chase scene. There is barely a moment where the characters sit and talk, and I think this is why, this is the reason that they couldn't really develop the characters as well as I would have liked. It's obviously wanting to keep the script and the pace fast and fresh throughout the film, so they don't have time to stop and develop characters, which, you know, I like to care about what's going on screen. You know, I like to care about the people we're looking at, and I found myself, I didn't, even when Sydney was in jeopardy, I didn't care. And I should. She's been the main character throughout all the films. I cared about her in the first three, but in this one, she might as well have not been there. There was too much emphasis on the new characters, the new teenagers, some of which were really good. The character of Kirby is a particular standout. I don't know the actress's name, but she did really well. And Emma Roberts as Sydney's cousin, I thought, did really well with her character. And also Rory Culkin, I believe, is another character in it. They all do really well. But there are so many side characters that they just kind of overwhelm the original three. Courtney Cox, David Arquette and Neve Campbell. They're the ones that you really want to see in this movie. And you don't get as much time with them as I would have liked. But again, that's down to the script really more than anything. Another kind of a problem that I had with the film was Wes Craven doesn't try to build tension in this movie. Now, you watch the original three Scream movies and they have frightening moments. They all have frightening moments in them, especially the first two. The horror movies, you know, they're supposed to be scary. This is what horror movies are. But in this film, it's more, you know, jumping out at you rather than trying to genuinely scare you. It's full of jump scares, and yes, some of them are effective, some of them fall flat, and they are fun to watch. It is fun to watch this, but there is not one single set piece that you will leave the movie remembering. Now, the first film had the opening with Drew Barrymore. The second film had that excellent sequence where Neve Campbell was in the back of a police car which got hijacked by Ghostface. And the third film had the opening with Cotton's character. Those were all memorable set pieces. This film doesn't have it. It has a fast-moving series of moments, but none of which are as well constructed or well directed as any in the original three, and that's another kind of niggle with it. And I know I sound like I'm being very negative towards Scream 4. I want to say right now that I really dug and enjoyed this movie, but when you compare it to the original trilogy, which is a very important trilogy to horror fans, it reinvented horror when horror was kind of on the back burner in Hollywood. This film just doesn't quite live up to the promise. Having said that, it is full of brilliant moments, especially where Neve Campbell has the best line in the movie, where she says, "You forgot the first rule of remakes: don't F with the original," which is obviously Wes Craven, his comment to Hollywood and producers in general, because it's mainly his movies that have been remade, like A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Hills Have Eyes, The Last House on the Left. The remakes, none of which were as good as the originals, because, like I said, Wes Craven, in his prime, was an absolute genius. So it is a shame to see that he didn't quite deliver on this movie. Having said that, this movie is so much better and far superior to Cursed and My Soul to Take and all the recent Wes Craven movies, because they've been really kind of disappointing. This one's a lot better. It is his return to form. As fans of Scream, go see this movie because you will enjoy it. I really enjoyed it. You know, I'm just trying to give a fair review based on the original trilogy, which I have here, which, like I said, I absolutely love. I love horror movies. I love Scream, some of my favourite horror movies. It's just, it's a shame it didn't reinvent the wheel again, is my problem with it. But it is a very good time at the cinema, and we should support it in a world where everything's been remade. Go and support Scream4, go see it, go support it financially, go check out Scream4, it's well worth it. And if you've enjoyed this review, please subscribe to my channel. Coming up, there's going to be reviews of Source Code and Hobo with a Shotgun, so look forward to those. Thanks, guys.